So friends, the first part, the basic groundwork to discuss Michael Madhusudan Dutt was done already. So we have his poems, in front of us as a part of discussion, and let's now then discuss him as a poet. Of course, in poetry also there is a kind of drama so far as this person is concerned. So maybe there is a clash of voices, clash of interests, clash of emphases. But then poetry is what we want to discuss further. So Professor Payal Nagpal will give you a view of Michael Madhusudan as a poet. So over to you, Professor Payal Nagpal.
Thank you, Professor Prakash. In the previous lecture, we did discuss the influence of the English Romantics and the way in which that also has a kind of romantic imagination. And here's a sonnet on the same. So he writes, "But oh, I grieve not for the azure sky, with all its host of stars that brightly shine, the green-robed earth with all her flowers divine, the verdant valleys and every mountain high, those beauteous maids that now do glittering lie, clad in bright sunshine, all, oh, all are mine. And much there is on which my ear and eye can feast luxurious. Why should I repine? The furious gale that howls and fiercely blows, the gentler breeze that sings with tranquil glee, the silver rill that gaily wobbling flows, and even the dark and everlasting sea. All these bring oblivion for my woes, and all these have transcendent charms for me." So I think this sonnet is very, very clearly written in the romantic style. So, how he says he does not grieve, for the azure sky with its stars. And, if we look at the way in which images are created, the similes, metaphors, green-robed earth with the divine flowers and the verdant valleys and high mountains and beautiful meadows that now do glittering lie, clad in bright sunshine. He says, oh, all are mine. And so he claims, and again, this also proves a certain kind of contrast to the previous sonnet that we have discussed, where he writes about the rich man and what the rich man has from the gilded floors and marble and menials at the door. But what is it that he values? And I think this sonnet brings forth, he says, everything, because he does not grieve. He does not grieve, he does not experience sorrow, because nature calms him and nature carries all the answers. So he says, there is a lot, he says, that his eyes and ears can feast on luxurious. So he says, why should I repine? And this takes us back to the first line of the sonnet, where he says, but oh, I grieve not, because the sky, its stars, the earth, the verdant valleys, the high mountains, the beautiful meadows, all of these, and this is sheer luxury, he says, and all of these kind of calm him and take care of him. So he says the furious gale that, kind of blows, the gentle breeze, the silver rill, that is the stream, and the dark everlasting sea. Now here there is an interesting contrast also. The furious gale is contrasted with the gentler breeze. So, the fact that nature is there in all its forms, the gentle nature, the furious nature, one that can be fierce and one that can be very, very mild and tranquil. So he says both are there, and the stream that wobbling flows, and the silver rill, the gaily wobbling flowing silver rill is contrasted with the dark everlasting sea. So he says all these bring an end to his woes, and these have transcendent charms, he says, for him. So here, I think if we were to just, it reminds one straight away of Wordsworth, and we are talking about the mid-19th century and the way in which somebody like Dutt, who's been trained in a sense in English language and literature, brings the same to the Indian context. And being an Indian, he chooses to write in that language and also use the forms and, language, the entire construct is very, very English, and he uses all that and kind of brings it to the Indian context. Would you like to comment on this, like where, for instance, in the previous sonnet we discussed it as a protest poem, and here we can see a sonnet that's written entirely in the tradition of the English romantics.
No, that is true, and he has not shifted ground too much, but then he is now giving another kind of flavor to poetry. For instance, he's talking about, he's chosen very clearly the earth and nature and trees and rills and all those things. That's a matter of choice. So stars are there above, but then here is where one belongs. And then he finally says whether it's up or whether it's down, all is mine. And when he says all, then it means, to me it meant two things: that all these are mine, and that all of us belong to them. So all actually spills over to the individual people also. So the nature and the sky and the stars, etc., all of them are there because human beings are there to appreciate them. So that kind of romanticism is very impressive.
Yes, and also a very fine and gentle view of humanism that is there in his writing.
And see the soft lines, the soft
Yes.
sounds and all, that is very romantic in the Keatsian sense of the term, and
Keatsian
even
sense.
Wordsworth.
Yes.
There is a music, in all these, and music is there not only in rhyme and rhythm, it's also there in the use of words.
And the fact that he says that these have transcendent charms for him, that
Yes.
it's not, I mean, it goes beyond the kind of luxuries that a rich man is involved in, and these also belong not just to him, but they belong, like I said, to everyone, to the poor man also. And how there is this connection then in that sense between humans and nature, that organic connection is like very well brought out by
the human and the natural, they fuse into each other.
Into each
Human
other.
being also is a
Yes.
part of the evolution.
Yes.
And actually this entire period is the period of evolution.
Yes.
Darwin is there.
Darwin is there.
Yes. And the nature and all those people.
Yeah.
So equality, nature, romanticism, a kind of loyalty to individuals and to soft things in life, all that makes it quite different from what poetry would have been in the 19th century in the hands of other poets.
And we have an intervention from India here. If we look at it, that in this entire discourse of English romanticism. So here is the intervention from the Indian side in a language that is not, that does not at that point of time. I mean, today English is pretty much a language that's here, and we use it in our. There's a complete body of writing which is Indian English writing. But at that point of time, for somebody to tread on those grounds was certainly very difficult. So this brings us to another, long poem by Michael Madhusudan Dutt, which is called The Captive Lady, an Indian Tale, which was written around 1849. And it's based on the episode when before, the invasion by Mahmud of Ghazni, the king of Kannauj celebrated what he called it was a moment to show his power, where he celebrates it with what is called the Feast of Victory, in which all the kings are supposed to come and accept in a sense his supremacy. However, the king of Delhi does not. And so on the last day of the feast, the king of Delhi, along with, a couple of other people, he enters the palace and in disguise carries off an image that is made of him. Instead of his presence, that image is made by the king of Connaught, so that, the supremacy is declared amongst all. And so he takes with him not just the image, but also one of the royal princesses, who he wanted to marry. And of course, the princess is then taken back and she's put into a solitary castle. However, he manages to, take her with him in the disguise of a Bhatt, or the Indian troubadour. So if we look at the way in which The Captive Lady begins, it again tells us about how as an Indian, Dutt is struggling with imagination, concepts that are Indian. It's not as if he's picking up something that belongs in a sense to the West, but for instance, The Captive Lady is based on this particular episode. And so it's interesting because it is because of this later that the ruler of Kannauj post the invasion by Ghazni refuses to kind of help the king of Delhi, though of course he himself is hugely affected by it later. So it begins like this: the star of eve is in the sky, but pale it shines and tremblingly, as if the solitude around, so vast, so wild, without a bound, hath in its softly throbbing breast awaked some maiden fear, unrest. So the description of the evening, the description of nature, the rhythm in the poetry, all that is there. However, at the same time, we must, though of course one acknowledges that writing in the 19th century, it couldn't have been better than this, really speaking. But of course, one also notices that there is a kind of gap, or, the content sits a little uneasily with the language. And that is also because he's a pioneer in the area, so it's not going to be, and one must appreciate that gap, because that gap tells us that he is experimenting with language in the Indian context. And anything that jars, or any idea that jars, is also something that has great value for that is the pioneer to immediately think that somebody has just walked into the scene and has access to the language and is suddenly converting a lot of the Indian concepts and rendering them into English is not an easy task, and it doesn't kind of come out as smoothly. So this is the best that it can possibly get. And then the description of the captive lady, she's shown as somebody who's not looking at the smiling sky. So again, look at the phraseology, softly throbbing breast, the maiden fear, so immediately resonates with the maiden, the description of the woman that is to follow later. So she looks not on the smiling sky, the wide expanse blue, far and high. She looks not on the stars above, throbbing like bosoms breathing love. So alliterative as well, bosoms breathing. And nor lists she to the breeze so gay, which whispers round in wanton play, and stirs soft waves of starry gleam to wake her from that moody dream. And there is a kind of rhythm, lyricism, and a kind of sensuousness that is there in these descriptions. And here the captive lady refers to from a context which belongs to in a moment in Indian history. So if we look at the description of the king here, so how he resists the feast of victory and the king of Kannauj. So but there was a monarch, he came not to that high reverie. They said he once had sought to gain the chieftain's daughter, but in vain, and his slighted love had taught hate deathless, deep, and unforget, such as the bosom's inmost care will darkly nurse forevermore. So again, when he goes to meet her later, and so there are of course changes that makes with the original episode, and how she's left grieving. So when she says that at one point the captive lady goes on to say that never will this heart be severed, and she says love to beat apart, and she says that I fear not death though fierce he be, and when thus I cling mine own to thee. So how the woman is also seen as somebody who's assertive, and so to render this episode from the context of India in a language that is very different from the Indian scene at that particular time. Though of course a lot of the social reformers, a lot of people, especially from the upper class who did have access to this language and culture. So I think it
very
would tie up with them.
spontaneously, what comes to mind in the context is the reference to, which is indirectly there to Sita, who was held captive by Ravan,
Yes.
another monarch or king, and then this one, Prithviraj, I think keeping captive, not Prithviraj but the other one, keeping captive Sanyogita. And there are lots of queens, which would be uprooted from their background and kept by the powerful in society. So it's a very important myth so far as Indian reality is concerned, and it's a person who is writing otherwise romantic stuff, and there is romanticism here also, as you said, there's sensuousness and all, but then it's a different take. It's about a tale. It's about rhythms, that are governed by a narrative, and it's not just poet and the atmosphere, but also the tale that is supposed to be adhered to. So I think he is taking chances. He is being very creative and experimentative, and he knows that he is treading on difficult ground, but then he has the courage to do so.
He has the courage to do so. So, in this, of course, finally the funeral pyre consumes the lovers, and the tale ends on a note of disappointment with the invasion. So it's important that he brings in the invasion here, and it ends like this, where he writes that where leafy branches twine and meet, though wildly round dread Agni roars, and Agni is important here. How he's also bringing in, today, especially in the process of translation, we bring in a lot of words that we feel are untranslatable in that sense, become a part of this. And so here, the part of the entire, use of the canonical language. So here, dread Agni roars, like angry surge by rock-girt shores, the soft gazelle of liquid eye leaves not her mate alone to die. So she does not leave her mate alone to die. So she too, jumps into the funeral pyre. And it finally ends with on a note that what books it now, since they must sheathe their blades in hearts have ceased to breathe, and conquest in proud triumph tread alone, white city of the dead. And it's important that these sonnets and the poem has been included in what is called the Bengali Book of English Verse that was written. Now, what was the reception of his writing in English is important, and here J.E.D. Bethune writes to Gordas Bashak and says that he should, Michael Madhusudan Dutt should not write in English, and he says he must employ his time to better advantage than in writing English poetry. And Bethune says he could render far greater service to his country if he will employ the taste and talents which he has cultivated by the study of English in improving the standard and adding to the stock of the poems of his own language. And it's interesting that in 2020, a play written on the life of Michael Madhusudan Dutt was penned by Namita Gokhale and Manasri Lal, and the play has a lot of letters that were written, and so we have access to it here. So he says, Bethune says that it's much better that this kind of writing is he writes poetry in his own language. And so if we actually then look at a poem that is written in Bangla and translated into English, it's on the Kapotaksha river. And here we can see a distinct difference from the early poetry that is written in English. And referring here to, again, to translation available in the play Betrayed by Hope. This is Nandan Dasgupta's translation. The different translations of this particular poem are available. So Dutt writes, "Always, O river, am I reminded of you." Now, in this solitude, I think only of you. There's a distinct difference from the way in which English is used in the sonnets earlier, or is used in The Captive Lady. So the idea is that he's obviously writing in a more direct manner. There's a smoothness and effortlessness to this kind of writing. So when it's translated into English, also the rhythm in a sense changes. So he writes, "As in their dreams people have hear magical sounds, so your soothing murmur charms my ears in delusion profound." Again, the whole context of the romantic imagination, the way in which the river influences him, and how he then combines it. We also have to now bring in the concept of a kind of patriotism and the idea of Bengal, the idea of the freedom struggle. So a nationalistic fervor that was there in the 19th century. So he says, and he brings this in, he says, "But this thirst of affection, which water can shake this ever?" And he says, "Stream of milk in the breast of my birthland, "Oh, will I see you evermore again?" And he says that as the subject gives taxes to his Lord Majesty, I beseech you, friend, to sing as a comrade would to Bengalis the name of one who, in your love suffused, chants in a foreign land your name in Bengal's melody. So, chants in a foreign land because he was in France when he wrote this, and he was missing, the Indian climes, and so he thinks of the Kapadaksha river, and he writes in Bangla, and then the translation, at least at one go, one can see a distinct difference in the rhythms of the two poems.
For the better or for the worse?
For the better, I think. For the better is what I would say. So here, because I think the Beat the Captive Lady, and he's a playwright, so of course a lot of plays are available, but there is a play that he wrote in English. It is called Rizia, and Anandalal's book Indian English Drama actually kind of uncovered 3 important Indian English plays, and one of them is Michael Madhusudan Dutt's Rizia. Originally written in English, not a translation. So Sharmishta and the others are plays that are written in Bangla, but this is a play that is written in English.
How do you compare the two, the translated text and the originally written in English?
So there is, for that again, I would, since we've not discussed the play here, I would just refer here to the sonnets, that there is a kind of easy rhythm, even when the Bangla is translated into English, that one can note. But there is a kind of, it's not very smooth when he's writing originally in English. There seems to be this tendency to and self-consciousness, and a tendency to imitate, in a sense, the Western style of writing. So of course the concept, the idea, the similes, metaphors, and all that is from the Indian context. But somewhere I felt that despite the rhythm and lyricism in the sonnets written originally in English,
Bangla idiom will do.
Yes.
Then
yes.
the English
and I think somewhere probably, I'm guessing that Dutt realized this himself, because after that he continues to write in Bangla, not in English. And even the play Rizia, I've read the play, so Rizia is also a play which is in the verse form, and again, there too one sees that whole tendency to kind of probably make it seem more English, than anything else, though the story, again, the tale that is being told is Indian. So, so he says that he writes about
any opinion available on his Bangla writing by critics in comparison with what he wrote in English?
I think he's credited with a lot of things that he brings to Bangla. So one of those being the free verse is something that Dutt brings to Bangla poetry. He brings us. There's a specific term for it, I think, Amitakshar verse that he brings in. And so there is the verse that he brings in. Then, the fact that when he writes Sharmishta, the particular form is something that is being used for the first time in Bangla writing, in Bangla drama. So that is there. And I think that critics appreciated his writing, which is why he's credited with a certain kind of renaissance in Bengali writing. Wouldn't be otherwise. So in fact,
his sensibility is modern.
His sensibility is modern.
Yes.
His sensibility is absolutely modern. And in fact, which is something that I mentioned earlier also, that if there is a kind of lack of smoothness, or it seems to be almost at times, as if he's trying to really imitate. But I think it's a brave act to write about the Indian stories, myths, legends in English at that point of time, and to look at that particular sonnet which reads like a protest poem. I think it's a brave act, and it should be appreciated for that.
And at a time when Indian writing is not known for its protest kind of movement.
Yes,
or
it's not
emotion.
known for it. Yes. So in fact, he's hugely influenced by Milton. He admired Milton, and he says that good blank verse should be sonorous, and the best writer, he says, is the toughest of poets, and he refers to Milton here.
So Meghnad is a demon, is Rakshas, as you say, and well, that kind of Rakshas is also there in Milton's Paradise Lost, Satan.
Yes. So it's interesting that this
Yes, yes.
particular,
Milton seems to have some fascination for, so far as the romantic writers are concerned. They also thought that Milton was on the side of devil's
yes,
party, and
to justify the ways of God,
God to
man.
men.
So
So ways of God to men is one, but secondly, that it is Satan, which say it's better to rule in
yes,
hell than to serve in heaven.
Serve in heaven.
So that kind of protest is there.
Yes, it is there, and which is exactly is that the influence of Milton is quite evident in these.
Having
sonnets.
fascination for Meghnad.
Meghnad, yes, and he admits it. He says that he totally admires him. So and this this book is very interesting. The Bengali book of English verse because it comes in the early 20th century, dedicated to the Earl of Ronald Shea. And he says this memorial of Bengali achievement in the language of the British Empire, and it is put together by Theodore Dunn, and this has a foreword by Tagore, and I think I would like to kind of sum it up with a quotation from what Tagore had to say, that while there are, he says, other Eastern countries captivated by the sight of immense power and prosperity which Europe presented to us, he says, Bengal has been stirred by the force of new ideas breaking upon her from the western horizon. And so he says one of its earliest effects on our students was to rouse them into an aggressive antagonism against all orthodox convention. So the way in which Michael Madhusudan Dutt's writing needs to be looked at within this context of what Tagore calls the aggressive antagonism against all orthodox conventions, he says, irrespective of their merit. So even if some were good, some were bad, there is a complete rejection, he says, and a sudden self-assertion of life after its repression for ages. So Tagore is looking at this outburst of writing as something, and he's saying this not just about that, but he says this about the other writers also who experiment with writing in English. And so he says that this inspiration, he says, of course, is coming from the West and has kindled the original spark in us into a flame that lay smothered in the ashes of, very importantly, and it's a beautiful phrase, he says, it lay smothered in the ashes of dead habits and rigidity of traditional forms. This is Tagore. This is Tagore who wrote a foreword to this book, where an Englishman has compiled, and Michael Madhusudan Dutt's two sonnets and The Captive Lady are part of this book. And finally, he says, this has been illustrated, of course, the course that our literature has taken, almost completely abandoning its earlier foreign bed, finding its natural channel in the mother tongue. And here he is referring, of course, to the way in which, Dutt is also experimenting with the language and then switching to the mother tongue.
So friends, this is a very fine, conclusion to the discussion about Michael Madhusudan Dutt, whose contribution cannot be ignored at all. And Tagore is the one, who appreciates this in such high terms. So with this, we come to the end of the lecture. I hope all of you have enjoyed this lecture from the point of view of significance, from the point of view of somebody being a pioneer, a new kind of a force in Indian English writing. Thank you.